This is Shelley Craft coming to you live on SNNLive. We're coming to you from the 2019 Disruptive Growth Conference in New York City. With me today is Bob Liscouski from Quantum Computing, Inc. It's a publicly traded company, and the symbol is QUBT. Bob, welcome to SNNLive.
Shelley, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. Let's get started with a brief overview of the company, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Simply put, Quantum Computing, Inc. develops software for quantum computers.
Let's get a little history behind the company.
So the company was founded on the notion that quantum computing, which is moving from theoretical to from the laboratory into the commercial space, it's going to be a few years yet. But ultimately, we'll need software to be a practical application. So we're focused on developing applications that will run on quantum computers, but solve real world problems today.
So give me an example of where a quantum computer would be necessary as opposed to any other kind of computer.
Well, I think near and dear to the Wall Street heart is the fact that quantum computers can have a significant impact on the ability to do very complex calculations, to do financial modeling. And that's precisely the software that we're developing.
What gives you your competitive advantage?
Well, we've got a tremendous team. They come from everything from Cray computers, supercomputers, another company that's been in the hardware space for quantum computing, and the fintech space. So we've got experts who are both application developer experts in fintech, as well as hardware experts that understand how quantum computers work and that are helping us develop the software that will run on the hardware.
What's the landscape like? This is obviously not the computer for, everyday people.
Right. Well, fairly, quantum computers aren't going to be a reality for another several years. But if you think about what computing was back in the late 70s and the early 80s, we're at that sort of threshold where this is going to be a significant change in the industry because quantum computing offers the opportunity and the promise to do things that conventional computers can't begin to do. It may take a few years to get there, but it's going to fundamentally change the way the computer industry is really organized today.
Is it on a global scale?
It will be on a global scale. I think the difference between where the industry is today versus where it was in the 80s is the fact that, computers are ubiquitous, right? And technology today is the sort of levels the playing field in many different ways. So it's not just the United States which has, the competitive advantage here, but countries like China, France, Canada, you name it, any of the developed countries have significantly invested in this technology today, and they are equally as ambitious in their programs as we are.
So you're a software company.
We are.
So you're supplying software to companies that are building the quantum computers.
That's
Am I
exactly
correct?
Right. Absolutely.
Is it across the board? Is it one software fits all?
Well, it's not yet because there's not one single design for a quantum computer. So we need to, and this is what we can do, we can tailor our software to run on the various platforms that ultimately become reality. So we have a software application that will be optimized to run on quantum computers, and we're doing a software stack that will allow us to be able to work on the various technologies as they become reality.
Who's your target market?
Well, initially it's going to be the fintech world. Right, they're the biggest payoff. They have the biggest problems to solve when it comes to moving money and figuring out where the money needs to be invested. They have some of the most complex problems to solve. But healthcare, the pharmacy and the genetics space is huge for us because, again, the complexity of the problems that have to be solved there, and then of course, encryption and security space.
That was my next question. So, how do you go down that direction?
Well, I've got a government background, and fortunately, you can't be in the quantum computing space without having some nexus back to encryption because it's such a big problem to solve, and there are a lot of people working to solve it. So we'll be playing in that space as well.
What is your exact background?
I've been fortunate. I've got a government and a private sector background. I was a senior official with Department of Homeland Security when we stood that up. I've consulted with the intelligence community for almost a couple of decades. So I've got the benefit of having an operational background, but a technology-enabled background, so I understand the real-world problems and where technology can really fit in.
So as a public company, realizing that, just talk about information that's already come out in press releases, right. What are some growth drivers?
Well, the growth drivers really are the opportunity in the fintech space. I think, as the headlines have been really focusing on what companies like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs are doing and investing heavily in there. And I think, we can be very competitive there because that's where a lot of money is going to today. So those are the growth drivers. And then, as I said, the healthcare market alone is a huge growth market because the problems that have to be solved there today need the complex modeling and computational power that quantum computing offers.
Where does the power in the quantum computer come from?
Well, it's fundamentally it's a different paradigm when it comes to conventional computing. Conventional computing is a 1 or a 0. It's either on or it's off. And the notion of quantum computing, it can be a 1, a 0, or both at the same time. So it's a little bit, when you look at the theoretical components of this and you think about some of the science fiction that's around quantum computing, it's turning out to be not so science fiction. It's going to turn out to be science fact. And the opportunity is that you can do things with quantum computers you couldn't possibly imagine doing with conventional computers today.
Bob, let's get your website out for our investor audience, if you would.
Sure. It's quantumcomputinginc.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Liscouski, Quantum Computing Inc., publicly traded company QUBT. I'm Shelley Kraft. This is SNN.Live, and we're coming to you live from the 2019 Disruptive Growth Conference here in New York City. Bob, great having you
Shelley,
on.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Enjoy the conference.
Thank you. You too.